Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to start writing some code. And the way that I'd like to start a video every single time is by creating a new JavaScript file so that each video the code from each video sort of stays in its own video. So the way that we're going to switch out files is by doing what we did last time, which is to right-click this code projects folder, and then I'm going to select new file. And then I'm going to name it sort of what the generic theme of the lesson is. And the theme for this video is if statements. So I'm going to call this ifstatements.js with that little hyphen in the middle. And then I'm going to press enter. And so I've got myself a blank file. But if I run this file, it will not run in the browser because I have to do one more change. And that change is to this script src. I have to change this name to if statements as well. So now when we run this, we're going to run our new JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, save everything, and now I have this file that I can work in. Big concept of programming. If you were to sort of just say it in one sentence, it would be the manipulation of data, or at least that's my definition. So we're using logic to manipulate data. And in order to manipulate data in code, we actually need data. And so the data that we're going to manipulate, at least for now, for a while, is going to be variables in memory. So let's go ahead and create a variable and talk a little bit about what a variable is. So the way you can create variables in JavaScript is by using the let keyword. So I'm going to go ahead and type let, and then after that, JavaScript expects something very specific. It expects a name for that variable. So I'm going to call this your number, and then and you'll see why in a little bit. And after I type that, I have the option to type an equals sign and to assign a value to this variable. And so the value that I'm going to assign to this variable is 30. All right. I'm going to go ahead and create one more variable. So that's a number, right? And then I'm going to create another variable called greeting. So let greeting, and then equals, and then I'm going to type quotes. So instead of a number, I'm going to type text. And text is what we call a string in JavaScript. So I'm going to type a string. I'm going to say hello and welcome to my code. All right, so there's our little greeting. Now this is great. So once I run this code, I'll have access to two variables. I'll have access to data, but I do not have a way to display that yet, right? I need a way to kind of see what's going on. That would be really great, huh? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to console.log. I'm going to use the browser console to display my information. So I'm going to console.log your number, and then I'm going to console.log greeting. All right, I'm going to just console.log those two things, and then now we have code that we can see, hopefully. So let's go ahead and do that. So I saved this, and I'm going to go into the browser, and I'm going to I got to open the code projects, open our index.html, and we see nothing, right? So that's not the full story, because it's in our browser console. So this is not something that every user experiences on a browser, but to see your browser console, you just right click, and then you click inspect element, and then you go to your console, and then you'll see that there's your information right there. So it says 30, which was our number, and then hello and welcome to my code. So those are the values of our variables that we chose to display. You can do this on any website. You saw a little preview of that. You can do this on any website. NASA.gov is a nice non-controversial website to try this on. You can right click and you can click inspect element, and it shows the inspector. and then I can look on the console for nasa.gov, and then I can see that there's some warnings here, right? Most commercial websites have warnings, and you might be interested in looking at the console for various websites that you see on your browser, right? So now that that's aside, we have a way to, the most important thing is we have a way to see what our code is. We have a way to see output from what our code does. So now that we have that, now that we have data, now that we have a way to see our data, we really need the programming part. We really need to be able to apply logic to our code to manipulate it in some way. And the most basic building block of logic, in my opinion, for programming is the if statement. And in JavaScript, you create if statements by typing the if keyword. Once you type the if keyword, JavaScript is going to expect something very, very specific. It's going to expect parentheses, and then it's going to expect something inside of those parentheses, some kind of a condition. And then after that, if I hold Shift and I type the left curly brace, then I type enter, whatever's inside these curly brackets, that's the code that will be executed if my condition is true. All right, so let's go ahead and make a condition. I'm going to go ahead and say your number is less than 40. So what I did is I added this thing, it's called a logic operator, and it checks if a value is strictly less than another value. And then if that condition is true, I'm going to execute whatever's inside this block of code. And so I'm going to put something there. I'm going to console.log your number is less than 40. All right, let's see if this works. So we have a variable value 30. We're checking if that's less than 40. And let's see if we see this text. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And yes, so your number is less than 40. Good. Does it always work though, right? Well, let's go ahead and see if, let's make this value 50. Is 50 less than 40? No, it is not. So we should expect to actually not see this in our console. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to our browser. I'm going to click refresh, and I do not see that third line of code. So the if statement only reacts to what is in our data, right? And we like to have code that only reacts to certain things in our data. That's a good thing. So let's go ahead and make another if statement. And this time I want to check if a number is equal to another number. And the way that we do that in JavaScript might not be what you think. So if I say if your number is equal to 5, that will not work the way you expect it to. This, remember, this equals means assignment statement. So what we actually want is a double equals. And what a double equals means is are these two values equal? When we have that single equals, we're just making 5 equal to your number. And so they're a little different, all right? So whenever you're inside an if statement, just make sure that you're using that double equals and you'll be all good. All right, so then we console.log, and then we say in quotes here, your number is equal to 5. Well, our number is not equal to 5 right now, so we should expect to not see this. So I'm going to go ahead and click refresh. Hello, welcome to my code. See nothing. Let's go ahead and make this value 5. Save it. Refresh. Hello, welcome to my code. Number's less than 40, 5 is less than 40, and 5 is equal to 5. Very good. So there's your basics of your if statement. Let's go ahead and do some more logic operators, just to give ourselves some more options when we code. So your number is greater than, And let's say we want to see if a number is greater than or equal to another number. There's a way to do that. And the way that we do that in JavaScript is a greater than sign followed by an equal to number. And then I'm going to say, let's go ahead and put 10 here. And then we're going to console.log. Your number is greater than or equal to 10. All right. And then I'm going to switch up something really, really quick. I'm just going to make this number 10, just to check that greater than or equal to, right? And then I'm going to make another if statement. Your number is greater than 10. And then we'll console log that as well. All right, let's go ahead and run this. So notice when we run this, our value was 10, and then our if statement triggered, your number is greater than or equal to 10, but the one that said that your number is greater than 10 didn't trigger, right? So sometimes you want all numbers including 10 and greater than 10, and sometimes you just want numbers greater than 10. All right, so there's the basics. I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to create something called an if-else statement. All right, so now I'm going to say, let's say if your, so sometimes we want to create a condition that triggers only when something is false, and then something that triggers only when it's true as well. And so what you want to do in that situation is an if-else statement. So I'm going to just say your number's less than or equal to 8. All right. And then after the if condition, after this second bracket, you want to type the else keyword to type your if-else statement, and then open brackets, enter, and you have 2 blocks of code. So this block of code in this if statement will trigger if this condition's true. So console.log your number is less than or equal to 8. All right. And then for else, what if this is not true? Well, we can console.log your number is not less than or equal to 8. That sounds a little strange, right? Another way to write that is your number is greater. All right. Let's go ahead and run this. So is 10 greater than or equal to 8? Yes, it is. Numbers greater to 8, greater than 8. Let's go ahead and make it 8. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Your number is greater than 8. Let's make the number equal to 8, just so we can see it working. And then we run this. Okay, great. All right, so just a little bit of logic thrown at you, and the very, very basics of coding in JavaScript. So we have a tool to be able to allow our code to react to our data, which is the foundation of what programming is, really. We want to use logic, apply it to our data, and have our code react in specific ways that we want it to based on that. So lots of stuff. Practice incoming so we can make this a solid foundation, and then we can move forward. So I'm really going to try not to harp on this too much, but I feel really strongly that the only way to learn how to code is by practicing to solidify the information that you have learned from other sources. you might think to yourself, there's not that much to what I just learned, and I could just pick it up really easy, and I could just watch a whole bunch of videos and then just know how to code. The brain, unfortunately, does not work like that. The best, what your brain, something happens in your brain when you're doing practice that allows you to hold on to information and retain information a lot better. Unfortunately, that does take more work on your part. That said, this practice is for you. I highly advise that you do this practice if you are going through this course, if you've made a decision to go through this course. Please, please, please do the practice, because you're going to learn so much more than just by watching the videos. So make sure that you're building the solutions that we build and then do the practice. I'm really going to try not to say that too much, but I feel very, very strongly that that's true. So here's some if statement practice. So I'd like you to write an if statement that is always false. So a statement that will never be true. So for example, a condition that's always false could be something like this. If 5 is greater than 8. 5 will never be greater than 8. Whoops. 5 will never be greater than 8, so that will never be true. So go ahead and think of a statement that's always false and go ahead and make that your condition. And then write an if statement that is only true when a variable is equal to or less than 50. Write an if statement that is always true. So we have the tools to do those three things now. Write an if-else statement that checks if a variable is equal to 6. And so you can console log the appropriate responses to whether or not a variable is equal to 6. And then write an if-else statement that checks if a variable is equal to or greater than 10. So be very careful with your wording, how you word your outputs with the logic operator equal to or greater than 10. And then as a bonus, so we didn't really talk about this, but this is something to think about and something we will get into, but write an if statement that's inside of another if statement. And we call this a nested if statement. So really, really recommend that you do this practice, and it will give us a really good foundation to move forward.